Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to talk to you about my top 10 favorite fiction reads from 2017. I love watching everybody else's top 10 lists at the end of the year, and I'm really excited to join in the fun for the first time this year with my top 10 picks. So in no particular order, really, until we get to the end, which I will tell you my number one favorite book of the year. I'm just going to jump right in. And the first book that's on my top 10 list is, let's see if I can get the picture right, is The Lawrence Browne Affair by Sebestian. And this is a romance novel where Lawrence Browne is the Earl of Radnor. He's convinced himself that he's going mad, even though he's a very intelligent scientist. But he just, because of family things, has convinced himself he's going nuts. But he is convinced by a friend of his that he needs a new secretary, and that's when Georgie Turner shows up to be his new secretary. But Georgie is a con man and a swindler, and he's fully convinced that he's just gonna come in and take whatever he can get from underneath the Earl and be on his merry way. Of course, that doesn't happen. Sparks fly and romance ensues, and it's just a great story. I actually read this in one sitting. I sat down to have a cup of tea and ended up reading the entire story in one go. Very much fun. If you like romances, I would encourage you to give this one a try. The second one on my top 10 list is Glass Houses by Louise Penny. This is number 21 in the Inspector Gamache mystery series set in Canada. And in this installment, a mysterious hooded figure, cloaked figure, shows up in the village green in Three Pines. And after a couple of days of kind of spooking the entire community, the figure disappears and a dead body shows up. So Chief Superintendent Gamache must find out who the dead person is, who killed the person, and all of that. And this installment actually has a court trial, and we flash back to the events that have happened with this hooded figure and the dead body showing up from also following the court trial. And I really, really loved it. I listened to these on audio. They're always excellent. I look forward to the new book coming out every year, and this one was no exception. I just absolutely love this mystery series. The next book on my top 10 list for the year, no surprise, talked about it recently, The Color Purple by Alice Walker, a modern classic. This was first published in 1982, and it's an epistolary novel told in letters back and forth between our main character Celie and her beloved sister. Celie, the book opens right up. Celie is sexually abused by her father and is then sold into marriage at the very early teenage years, and the marriage is abusive, and so these horrible things are constantly happening to Celie. But instead of this dragging Celie down, she finds female companionship, friendship, love, and support throughout her life. And we follow her over the course of about 40 years, starting in, I think, the 1930s in rural Georgia. And we follow her throughout, and the female friendships that she finds are empowering. The whole story is really empowering for females, I believe. It's heartwarming as well as being heart-wrenching. And we follow these letters back and forth between Celie and her sister as they try to reconnect with each other over the course of their lifetimes. A lovely, lovely novel, and I hope to watch the movie at some point, which I have not yet seen. The next book on my top 10 list is Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. This is a short story collection that came out in 2017, and Roxane Gay really writes from a variety of perspectives, from female perspectives, from poverty, from privilege, from marriages, from dating, from even a stripper and her trying to get away from sort of a person who wants to be her boyfriend but is kind of stalking her. So a lot of different female walks of life and also experiences, and I just love Roxane Gay's prose. It's always stripped bare and a punch to the gut. She really knows how to get at real life issues in a way that I just find really enthralling. She's such a great author, a great writer, and I would read anything she writes, and I just love this short story collection. The next thing I read, the next thing on my top 10 list is one that I read for the autumn readathon back in October, and it is Sarah Waters' The Little Stranger. And it's a nice shot of the creepy manor house that figures in as sort of the main character in this story. This is a gothic tale that takes place in the 1940s in a dilapidated manor house in England. A rural doctor gets basically sucked into this down on their luck aristocratic family, the Ayres family, and over the course of 1 year he gets completely entwined in their life, and a series of terrible events happen, and it sort of just snowballs, you know, like one bad thing just sets off another bad thing, and he is more and more involved in their lives, and it starts off kind of slow and creepy, but the atmosphere just continues to build in this creepy gothic way until I was like flying through the pages. Like, it was such a page turner for me by the end. So highly recommend if you like this sort of gothic, creepy, haunted maybe manor house type story. I would definitely tell you to give this the Little Stranger a whirl by Sarah Waters. The next one on my list is Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is one of my favorite authors. I'm gonna try to read all of her writing, and this was the one I read this year. And this story follows 15-year-old Kimbili, I think. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I didn't listen to this one on audio, so I don't know how to pronounce the name. In Nigeria, she and her older brother are growing up in sort of a life of privilege. Their father is a wealthy man. He owns factories, but he's extremely religious, has forsaken the traditional religion of Nigeria and is totally into Catholicism, but he's a fanatic about it, and he's also abusive, and their mother is very much downtrodden and kept under his thumb. And as the government of Nigeria starts to basically fall apart, there's a military coup, there's a lot of violence happening, Kimbili and her brother get sent to live with their father's sister in the country. And while living with their aunt, they learn what it's like to live in a family that is full of love, and they learn about the traditions of their country, and they learn what it's like to have freedom as a teenager and growing up in a family. And through all that, Kimbili becomes stronger, and it's kind of a coming of age tale, and you can see her blossom under this new family lifestyle. But what happens when she has to go back to live with her parents? It was such a lovely story. It was really, it really tugged at the heartstrings, and I just loved it, and I just love everything that Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie writes. She's so excellent. The next thing on my list is actually a little bit of a cheat, because I'm going to show you The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, but I'm really recommending, or in my top 10 is the entire Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This is a fantasy series. This is the last book that came out this year in the series. It's excellent, it's inventive, it's diverse. It uses the forces of geology for the magic system, which is something that I had never encountered before, not in this way. And it uses basically climate change type catastrophes to show what would happen to a civilization if they were constantly having to deal with these major catastrophes and earthquakes and long periods with no summer and all of that sort of thing. What happens to civilization when you're constantly dealing with the end of the world? And I love the characters. I loved the construct of the world. I just loved everything about it. I thought it was extremely inventive. And I've tried to read other stuff by N.K. Jemisin in the past and hadn't really gotten into it, and this was the first time I really got sucked into one of her worlds, and I'm just so thrilled that I did. It was just a wonderful fantasy series, and I just loved everything about it. The next thing on my top 10 list is another short story collection, and this one is American Housewife by Helen Ellis. And this book is exactly the kind of short stories that I love. Snarky, realistic, written in a variety of formats. There's one short story in here that's just written in a back and forth email exchange between two women who are basically fighting over the wainscoting in the hallway of their apartment building, and the snark and the sarcasm, just wonderful, just lovely. This also looks at a lot of sort of traditional women's roles or traditional women's activities, from like book groups to shopping for bras to dealing with house decorating and things like that, and sort of what's going on behind the scenes with women when they're dealing with these domestic issues. This is such a fun and funny book, and really is really being sarcastic and twisting around the traditional women's activities in America. And I think this is a wonderful short story collection, and a good place to start if you like short stories that are not that don't have fantastical elements or aren't sort of magical realism or fantasy type based short story. If you're more into realistic realism type things, I think you should give this one a try. The next to last book on my top 10 list for 2017 is one that I listened to on audiobook, Stay With Me by Adebayo. Let me see if I can get this right. Ayobami Adebayo, I think is how you say that. I'm sorry for butchering that name. This African author is, I believe this was her debut novel. It was shortlisted for the 2017 Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction, and it's basically a marriage story. A young couple falls in love in university, they get married, and then they are unable to get pregnant. And in their society, that you have to provide the heir. And so they become increasingly under pressure from his family to deal with this issue that they haven't been able to have a baby, and the way they want them to deal with it is for the husband to take on another wife, because that is what happens in that society, is that the men take on multiple wives in order to ensure that the line of progression happening. But they had promised each other when they fell in love in university that they would not go that route, that they would just be the two of them in their marriage. And so the pressure starts to build, and then what happens? I don't want to give anything away. This was a definite page turner. I had to know what was going to happen. It's just a wonderful, gripping story of a marriage, and what will you do to make your marriage work, and what would you do if you felt you were betrayed by your spouse. Excellent book. I listened to it on audio, as I said. It was wonderful on audio. I would certainly recommend it on that in that format, and I can see why it ended up on a prize list. I look forward to seeing what else Adebayo writes in the future. And my number one book of the year is a YA book, and it is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, which was longlisted for the National Book Award. The Hate U Give follows Star, an African-American teenager who witnesses the death of her childhood best friends at the hands of a police officer during a routine traffic stop. And then we follow on from there with the fallout of that, and how Star tries to balance. She basically is trying to live two lives. She lives in a community, in an urban community that has a lot of gang violence. Her dad owns a grocery store, but he's also been in jail earlier on in his life. And so they're trying to deal with, trying to have their family in this this environment that is, you know, dangerous at times, but also very close, a very close-knit community. And then Star also goes to high school at a pretty much all white private high school in the suburbs. She has a white boyfriend, and so she's basically one star when she's at school, and she's another star when she's at home in her neighborhood and working at the family grocery store. And how does she balance those two lives and also deal with the fallout of her friend being killed by the police? I found this story rang so true to me. It was so authentic. It was so real. I think it speaks to what the issues of our time. I think it tells a story in a way that anyone can understand and relate to and empathize with. And I think that's what the best fiction does, is that it gives you a way to see how somebody else lives, even if that life experience is completely and utterly different than your own. You can have empathy and you can understand what that person is going through. And I think that The Hate U Give does that exceedingly well, and that's why it's the best fiction book that I read in 2017. It's been a great reading year, and I look forward to sharing my top 10 nonfiction books in a different video, as well as some of my reading stats in another video. I hope everyone had a wonderful year of reading in 2017, and here's to an entirely new set of awesome books in 2018. I will talk to you later.